Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar will be about creating an appealing and loopable animation in Moho with our presenter Dave Cockburn. Before we begin the webinar, there are some housekeeping items that we'd like to go through. The webinar will be approximately 1 hour long. All attendees will be muted. Question and answer session will be during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Attendees can ask questions in the GoToWebinar question box right away. Due to time constraints, not all questions will be answered. The webinar will be recorded. The recording will be shared on social media and will be sent via email to all registrants and attendees. The panelists for this webinar are Mario Quiñones, myself, Victor Paredes, and Dave Cockburn. For those of you who join us for the very first time or have never heard about Moho, Moho is your all-in-one animation software. Moho is a powerful 2D animation software that combines the most powerful animation technology with the state-of-the-art professional animation tools. Draw, rig, and animate easily. You can create your characters directly in Moho with its vector tools optimized for animation, or import images or Photoshop files, keeping the link and layering structure. For more information, visit mohoanimation.com. Also, we want to encourage you to share this webinar on your Instagram stories. So you can tag us and as hashtag webinar, hashtag mohoanimation, at Squeaky Pics, and at mohoanimation. So if you share us on your story, we'll be sharing your story as well. And with that, I will leave you with Dave and his presentation, Creating an Appealing and Loopable Animation in Moho. Dave is a freelance animator, illustrator, and designer and has been working with Moho pretty much all of the century. Over the past 20 years, he has used Moho for TV commercials, short films, infographics, interactive animations, e-cards, and looping animations for the web. As well as working on the projects as Squeaky Pictures, Dave is also co-director of Mo Choy Design Limited. And with that, we'll pass the reins of the webinar to Dave. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm in the room. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me with this. This is, you may have seen this on social media, but this is the loopable animation that I'll be going through. I actually made this specifically for this webinar because generally when I'm doing little animations like this, a lot of it ends up on small bits of paper and gets thrown away. But this time I've actually captured everything from the initial idea right through to this final animation. So let's go through that. And I'm going to warn you in advance, there are no nice drawings here. So this is my first animation, first idea rather. I wrote down looping animation and very roughly scribbled a cartoon cat because everyone likes cats. And then I kind of thought, dinosaurs, yeah, everyone likes dinosaurs as well. So then I just started scribbling a dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus, which kind of struck me. He's got big back legs, tiny front legs. Oh, it'd be perfect for a scooter. More vague drawings ensue, including a bit of a meteor here, because dinosaurs and meteors go together like bread and ginger, fish and chips. I then, with some more bits of paper, I start working out sort of sizes, try to just play around with the character. I'm working really small here because I'm just thinking about shape and emotion, I guess. Once I get a bit closer, I then swapped to my sketchbook and thought, well, I suppose I better do a quick storyboard. So I have meteors coming down, dinosaur scooting along, looks back, big meteor comes down. There's a huge explosion. You think he's died. He bounces out of the flames and then back to continue, which is a bit over the top for a very short animation. But these are the initial ideas. I also put here scooter loop that he just scoots and looks back, probably a bit more sensible. I also started thinking about prehistoric plant life, sort of tree ferns. I thought they're kind of nice shapes. And then I kind of thought, oh, maybe I could do a happy dinosaur scooting in front of really cool tree ferns, maybe some pterodactyls in the background. More tree ferns, yeah, tree ferns in the foreground. And then, no, I kind of prefer the apocalyptic approach. So that's kind of what I went. So with that in mind, again, on little bits of paper, I'm just kind of thumbnailing head turns, leg positions, how meteors might work. And then I move into Clip Studio Paint, which is my drawing weapon of choice. I actually scanned this very rough dinosaur. You can see he's quite tiny from my sketchbook because I kind of thought it had the right feeling. So once I brought this in, I just colored it, knocked it back a bit, and then went through and cleaned it up. Once that was done, I used this cleaned up image, and then using Clip Studio Paint's animation tools, I just knocked in a quick leg movement. Really all I need is a stretched leg and a compressed leg because Moho will take care of the rest. I also did the same for the head because I want a blink. I just roughed out the blink and a head turn position. Once that was done, I then started working on color. This was my first color, which is quite loud and just too much going on. The second one, I sort of introduced a sort of bit of texture on the dinosaur. Have the meteors a similar color to the background, so it's just giving a hot feeling, but the focus is on the dinosaur. I then tried another color experimentation and eventually got to the purple dinosaur. So that's what I got to at the end. So with all the groundwork out the way, I then hop over to Moho, which I guess is why we're all here. So first thing to do is to select tracing image. So that image, that clean up rough, tracing roughs, I load that into the background. I will also go to, this is the style tab, the advanced style tab, so I can see that. I will then go to custom image and I will find a color palette, which is just saved out from my color experiments, but I just blow up some of the colors as circles. Now for this, if you just swap to pen here, if you left click, it selects the fill color. If you right click, it selects the stroke color. So I've got a folder with a body and the texture sorted. We'll go to the body layer and I will quickly just draw out, click and drag the body shape. So unhide that. So have a basic shape there. As you see, it doesn't match terribly well, but you can simply just add points and drag them with the add point tool. You can also just manipulate them get them in the right place. And even if you want to sharpen the lines, for example, you can either use the handles here, or if you click on the middle point and just drag, it just sharpens up, or you can just click the peak tool. Okay, so the next thing is, how do you do the texture? Well, on a separate layer, I simply select a brush texture setting, stroke color, and I happen to know through experimentation that 60 pixels is good for this. And then I will just click and drag a bit of a zigzag. I'll select the shape, enter it, and hide that. You can see it's working quite well there, but we want to clip it to the body shape. So because I've put this in a group folder, I can just right click and mask inside. So, and this is all vectors, so it's all resolution independent. So next thing to do is just go through and do the rest of the dinosaur. There's two nostrils there because if you remember the rough drawing of the head turn, it starts with one nostril and ends up with two. So this one, when we do the rig the final thing, will be masked, so you'll be able to see it revealed. So let's go to the rig. Next stage is rigging. I've just set up a bit of a skeleton here, and we'll just go through and do the basics using the leg. So I'll go to, I've created a bone layer, and inside the bone layer is the vector layer of the leg. So in the bone layer, I will just click and drag. Best way to think of this is where actual bones would be inside a leg. So I'm just going to do something like that. So we'll just test that. And as you see, it's a bit squidgy. Not entirely what we like. We can refine that a bit by going on the bone strength tool and just knocking that back a bit. And we'll just test it again. That's looking a lot better, but we can do better than that. But to do that, we'll need some smart bone actions. So I'm going to pick that bone, I'm going to call it shin, enter, and then I'm going to hop over to the actions tab, smart bones, and I'm going to add a shin action. So let's just scoot down the timeline to somewhere like 96, and I'm going to rotate this bone somewhere like that. So now, if I just go to the leg, I can manipulate these points to make it look a bit nicer. And just use the bit zoomed out to do that one. I shall just hop in and sharpen that one up. Just move. Let's zoom out. Let's see what that looks like. So that looks a lot more reasonable. So if we hop back to the main timeline and the bone layer and just manipulate the bone again, that animation is actually tied to the bone rotation. And as you can see, you can go a bit too far and it kind of looks a bit weird, but what you can do with that is, again, select the bone, go to bone constraints and select angle constraints. And that limits the amount of rotation the bone can do, which is a bit helpful when you're animating, so it doesn't go too far beyond. You can refine that further, but you will hopefully get the idea. Now, if you look at the foot, it's maybe a bit squidgy, but again, there's other things we can do for that. We can stop rotating the workspace. You can just zoom in. We go to the leg and we have point binding. So we select the bone we want to bind the points to, and we select the points. So in this case, I think we'll select most of the foot. I'm going to click enter there, and oh, that didn't work. I'm going to try that again. Select most of the foot, click enter, and then go and test it. And as you see, I missed one there, so just go in. This went much better in rehearsal. Just select all these. It's better. Click that. And test it. And this point here could be sorted out with more smart bones, but hopefully that should give you the idea. Right, the other thing I use in the rig are target bones. So make sure no bones are selected by just clicking off, and click the add bone tool and just press it. And that will give you a bone with no length, and I'm going to call that target. I'm also going to turn its strength to 0 because in this case we don't want it to distort the leg. So the next thing to do is to go into the leg constraints, and I'm going to choose the target. It's going to be pointing at the target, and while we're here I'm going to select those two bones. I'm going to put some squash and stretch on them. Anything more than one, you will actually see something happening. And I'm also going to select the foot and turn on independent angle, and I'll show you what that does. So if we test this, the leg will try and point to the target, but the foot doesn't rotate. So what that means is when we're animating, see, we're like that, we can then rotate the foot independently. And variants of that are what makes the final rig, which I have here. Now, there should be a lot more bones, but I've hidden them. This is another incredibly useful thing to do, show and hide shy bones. These are all the bones. These are the targets. This is the main bone because it's the scooter really. And some of the targets are parent to the scooter. The leg one isn't because I'll just show you this. If I move that, it's separate from the scooter itself. So let's just delete those. I will then just go back to the bone, hide selected bones, sorry, bone, hide showed shy bones. It's really easy to add a shy bone. Basically, just select some bones that you don't want to see, and on the top here, you just click shy bone, and then that will tidy up a workspace, making it easier to animate. Next, head turn. So if we turn this, you get a head turn. And this is done with smart bones again, but quick way to do it, make sure I'm on frame 0, is just draw a bone, go to bone, make smart bone dial, just accept that. And then you can go in and, like we did before, manipulate the model so it animates when the head turn turns. So if we go to the head turn here, you can see it's manipulating these bones up and down to give a little head bob of anticipation, but it is also, just go to the head turn dinosaur, you can see the head. If we just mine down here, we go to the skull, we can see that as it turns, those points change into the head turn position, which is based off the rough I did before. I also manipulated the tongue and the teeth and the eye and everything, but and you can use point tools, but the magnet tool is quite good for doing broad shapes. So that is the rig done. So next thing we want is some meteors for the background, and they are incredibly simple. If I just scroll through this one, you'll see it is, if we go to the tail, it is simple, just shape, but I have selected some of these points, and let's just go in and turned the keyframe method into noisy. So that just gives a little bit of noise. You can change it in the keyframe settings. And as you see, the points around the meteor itself don't change. So that gives a nice kind of fiery effect. And when it hits, basically the meteor disappears, and all I did was I moved the points around with the magnet tool and the point tool just to give a bit of an explosion. But that's not explosive enough, so I added some particle sparks. So they are simply, you can see that one, they're simple shakes that rotate and fade out. There's a few of them. Still not spectacular enough, so I put some impact sparks. So when it hits, bang. Also more big zigzaggy sparks, just to enhance it even further. And finally, some smoke. Sorry, I have to move the cat off my keyboard there. Bang. And smoke is simply a kind of puff shape, but it kind of inflates over its life. Again, I use the magnet tool for that. But the smoke particles have actually really big blur to them. So, and as they get older, they get more and more blurry, which gives quite a nice effect. So if I just show you, render this one, you see, you can hardly see it. Let's just try it earlier. There. The other thing, just to give a bit more interest to the explosion and the effect, is I have, if you just zoom in here, this is all but the workspace. Just change them in depth a little bit. And you can do this by going to your particles, particle options, and that is source depth. And it kind of helps, and it gives, if there's any camera moves, it gives a nice bit of parallax to the effect, which is what we're going to do next. So the next thing I did with that is simply animated that whole thing, the meteor going down just on a guideline like that, just to give me an idea of the angle I wanted. So that was the meteor done. Next, so I set up a 1920 by 1080 project, which is a standard HD TV and 24 frames a second, which I like. It's film. I'm from that era, and it works quite well if you've got lots of fast movement, which this has. So we're about ready to animate. So I don't need the square guide, though I should actually just explain about it. Because this project is going to be flexible enough to be shared as a widescreen, as a square project for social media, and even a vertical project, I want to make sure that all the most important action happens within the square. So I make sure the dinosaur's inside the square and you get a good view of some meteors inside that square. Don't need it for the moment, but so now we are on to the first cycle. So first thing to do is go to your setup, because I want the dinosaur with his foot on the scooter, and I will, let's see, I will freeze the pose, Control F. And what that does is just makes a keyframe for everything in the scene at that point. So I'm going to copy my first frame to my last frame. These are just markers, just so I know where we're going. And these last frames here, I'm going to set to cycle. And I'm going to loop it back to frame number 2, because we copied frame number 1 to the last frame. So we don't want it going back to frame number 1, because we'd have 2 number 1 frames there. So you'd get a little bit of a hiccup in the cycle. So you're scooting along. In the middle somewhere, you are going to just have a high position like that. And I guess you're going to have the leg up. So not exactly what I want, but early days yet. So next thing to do, I'm actually going to copy these frames again, because I want the foot to slide back. So I will select that target, hold Shift, and just drag it back. So what have we got there? Up. So somewhere around here, he should be around here. And see, we can just go in, lift the foot up a bit, and then we want a nice contact, which is probably something like that. So then we have a very basic looping animation. Now I have worked out the length of this scene. I'll just zoom out a bit. So if we put an onion skin, just click on this line here, make sure onion skin's turned on. I've got outlines only because I find it more accurate for this sort of thing. And if we go to the frame after the last frame, it should be identical to the first frame. So as that's all the animation is, it will automatically loop back and be seamless. If you want to change the length of it, you could simply just find another frame where the leg matches up and end the scene then. So that's the start. I have refined the animation in this one with a bit of keyframe shenanigans, and I've actually loaded in a meteor So how you do that is you go to import Moho object, and then we will find, you can load any scene from this. So let's just go that, that's got a meteor in. You can select the meteor and then load it in. So we've got dinosaur on the spot, and it also a meteor not moving. And what I wanted from this scene is a kind of panning scene, which in live action, you'd actually have your own dinosaur who would be scooting, and you'd have a camera on a track which would match it. There's a couple of ways to do that. One is to animate all the meteors actually panning through the scene. But I think an easier way to do it is actually use Moho's camera. So what I will do, I will make sure the keyframes are set to linear because I don't want any slowing up and slowing down because it's a cycle. And I'll go to the end, and all I will do is, again, holding shift, I'll just move the camera back. So if we scroll through it, you get the idea. Now we want the camera to be attached to the dinosaur, or the dinosaur attached to the camera. The way we do that here is to make the dinosaur immune to camera movements. So if we apply that, that should give us the effect we're looking for. So now we want to loop the meteors. This meteor is not a problem because it doesn't happen near the beginning or the end. It comes into frame in the middle and it's gone before we get to the end. So anything like that would just loop in there quite nicely. What we do want to do is hide the join. So to do that, we need to go back to the first frame. I'm going to duplicate the meteor. I'm going to call it meteor loop. Let's pull back so we can see it. So what we want to do is have that happen right at the beginning. So how we do that in Moho is we go to Moho sequencer. So each layer here has its own track in the sequencer, which you can move in time. So in the meteor loop, what I want to do is actually just move it so it just hits the ground on the first frame. And then I can just, again, shift, move this into frame. So back to channels. So the problem here is what we want is, unless we loop this, you never see the meteor arriving. So to do that, we will duplicate meteor loop, and I'm going to call it clone. And again, hop back to the sequencer. But this time I'm going to put a onion skin there. And I'm going to select the frame as the frame after the animation ends. So again, we don't get that double frame. So we can see that, but what we want to do is move this second meteor. So until we get to the same point there, which we have done, and then we want to move it back into place. Which you do there. Now, we need a bit of tidying here because this was the frame 0 before, and we've moved it so it would zoom, it would animate in. which is not what we want because you wouldn't get a seamless loop there. So all we need to do is just select that keyframe, drag it on top of there, and job's a good one. So let's just see that. Let's go to View, Show Output Only. This might help a little. And we'll play this. So you should see the entirety of the meteor coming into frame, going out. So that is all very well and good, but I don't know if anybody noticed there was an error in that. For this, it doesn't really matter, but the error is down to particles. When you shift a thing in time, the particles haven't fired. So if you look at frame number 1 there, there's no particles. And if you look at the end frame there, we have some particles. For this one, it doesn't really matter, but there is a way around this. And what this would be is to render out the meteor and load it back in. So this is just a scene where we have the meteor loop. We would go back to our meteor scene. We'd set it up. There you go, just so it looks nice in frame, how we'd want it. And we only want certain frames, so those and those. And to select that, you click Alt and left click, sets your start frame, and right click sets your end frame, and then render them out, which would export animation and make sure it's as a PNG image sequence. So I have done that previously, as in all good cooking shows. So what I will do is I will actually go through import and import an image sequence. And there's my pre-renders. I'll just click the first one, it'll open all of them. If we scroll through, you have a bit of rendered out animation, which is a bit low in frame. So what we'll do is simply on frame 0, lift it up a bit. And the other thing we can do is if you select a corner, hold Alt and drag, it doesn't actually scale the meteor. I'll just turn off the dinosaur here so you can see. It pushes it back in 3D space. So if we just scroll, doesn't show that very well, but trust me, it does, and it's very useful. Let's just go home. So next thing to do is to put this in the background meteors. I'm going to group with selection to put it in its own group. I'm going to try that again to make sure. Oh, I'm not on frame 0. A common fault I have. Group with selection. Let's call that. And what I need is a sync point. It's actually because we're syncing in time and position, and being a bitmap, it's kind of tricky to see. So I like using outlines only. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a vector image. I'm going to call that sync. And I'm just going to draw a big square. So go to the style, make sure I have not got the huge pencil-y line on. And I'm just going to drag out a big square here. So again, with the sequencer, we'll go to the bit meteor, and we'll just shift that back so maybe it's there, just so we get a chance to see it coming on and we get a bit of overlap. Next thing we do is we go to the sync point. I'm going to open up the layer properties by double clicking. I'm going to allow animated effects, and at frame 0 I want it invisible, so I'm going to uncheck that, apply it. On frame 1, the first frame, it happens in. I'm going to make it visible, apply that, and guess what the next frame is going to be? Yep, it's going to be invisible. So back to the channel. So on that first frame, the first frame it occurs, we've got a nice big flash, which should be easily to match to with, and accurate to match to with vector lines. So again, let's duplicate that. I'm just going to call it clone. Hop back to the sequencer, bit meteor clone, and I'm going to zoom up. So there. So I want that to occur there. So there. So that occurs again, the frame after the animation stops. So I'm going to turn on the onion skin for the first frame. I'm going to scoot that down. I'm going to match it up. And then in your bit meteors, just turn off the sync. Again, go back and tidy up, just so we don't get extra animation. We don't want to turn that off. So view, show output only. And if we play this back, you should see the meteor coming in all the way in and hitting the ground. So they're the two ways of sorting out the looping. The bitmap, you don't need to use the bitmap one unless you're using particles, I guess. It would have worked perfectly for really cool prehistoric ferns, but there you go. The other thing with the rendering is if you feel really dangerous and use hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of particles that might bring your machine to its knees, you can render them out, put them back in, and you'll get playback. So now we're on to export. So I have added lots of meteors, again by using that pushback technique in 3D space. You can see it more on this one. It gives a very nice parallax effect as you scroll through the animation. The other thing you can do when you're loading in the vector meteors, see, so I should have quite a few of them in here. Let's just pick this one. Anything that has particles, because we don't want all the meteors to look exactly identical, you can go to the particle options and randomize them. So this will just change the positions of where all the particles start. And if you do that for each meteor you bring in, it just changes them a little bit, so it's not so obvious that it's exactly the same meteor, even though the fiery tail is exactly the same. But just remember that if you are doing the clone meteors, the meteors that hide the seam, the particles should be the same. So if you randomize the first one before you do the clone of it, it will work. If you randomize both of them, it won't. So with that out the way, turn me dinosaur off. Hey. The other thing I've done here is when the bigger meteors hit, I have put a bit of camera shake, and that's easily done using the camera track. Basically just create a keyframe in there and make it noisy. Simple as that. And because so that will only work on the background. And because the dinosaur is unaffected by the camera, you would have to go into the dinosaur and look at the dinosaur's layer transition and do the same in there. Maybe a couple of frames later, just to enhance the effect. How are we doing? Oop. So output. I worked at 1920 by 1080. So go to project settings. I'll go to 1080 by 1080, which will mean we will export when we render a square version. You can then go through and export different versions quite easily. So if I revert that, I can do the full 1920 HD version, but I blew up the dinosaur a little, as you can see, just using the space a lot better. I should turn off my square guide. And basically the way to do that, when the dinosaur has a bit of animation, which would be this, all the camera moves or whatever, basically select the icon. It will select all the keyframes on your timeline, and then you can then you should be able to, if you go to the right frame 0, you should be able to move everything at once. So, and finally, I exported as a vertical piece, shrunk the dinosaur down using those techniques, but I've also, just because of what's happening in the background, I've had to move meteors into frame a bit with a bit of tweaking. But as everything here is vectors, you don't lose any quality, and the bitmap meteors are just the same size, just repositioned. So that's pretty much how I did it. One other thing, the shadows and wheels on the dinosaur, if I just find the video, if you can see here, if you look here, oh, there you go. Looks like the wheels are going around and it's going over ground. All that is are static images with a bit of noise put on them. Noise is a great thing to mess around with. Subtly, you can make a thing look slightly more hand-drawn, but it works great for stuff like that. And I think that is about it. So I guess, Mario, if you want to ask me some questions.
Yep, yep. Let's go with the Q&A. Thank you so much, Dave, for this terrific webinar. Everybody is loving it so far. So let's go to some questions. Well, this is a funny question. So what's your cat's name?
My cat, I have two, and one is called Byron, and the other one is called Ada, and they're Siamese.
And
And they
is
have
it
left
great
me
to work?
alone. Sorry?
Yeah, is it great to work with them, or are you just
Yeah, sometimes when it's cold, it's great because they do tend to sit on my shoulders.
all
Uh,
right?
but yeah, sometimes they can get in the way, but
So they're nice
generally it's all
colleagues.
right. It's one of the benefits of working from home.
Exactly. Well, another question because you've been a long time user of Moho. What's your favorite feature of the software?
Oh, bones, I guess, just bones. It just
Uh-huh.
makes it so easy to take a still image and put a bit of life to it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the smart bones are a real game changer as well. It just makes rigging so much easier. Whereas previously, in early days of Moho, you would have to create sub bones that matched rotations to other bones that were linked to certain
Right.
points to compensate for joint compression, like on the leg. Now I
Mm-hmm.
can just go and sculpt it basically. I mean that is brilliant. There's so many good things about it. It's it is quite easy to get your head around compared with a lot of other animation softwares I've used, and it's often just a lot quicker to do things in it than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, another question was about those three yellow lines that you have on the timeline.
Ah, yes. They
What
are
are those, and how can you make them?
okay. Sorry, I should have said that a bit more. That's really easy. They are markers, basically. Really useful when you want to sync stuff. Say, I want to know, oh, it hit there. I just go and create a marker and call it hit. And that gives you a visual of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should
Awesome.
answer that. Actually, going back to favorite, let's just click this, favorite things in Moho. This is something which is I really love. You can select keyframes, and if you hold down Alt, you can change the timing of them. So that will
Right,
go
the
very
stretching.
slow, very fast. I do end up using that a lot because then you can just throw down some animation and then see it play back and then just stretch it and get the timing right. They are. I asked myself a question and answered it.
Mm-hmm. Well, here Matt Jordan says, during the storyboard thumbnail phase, are your ideas in any way influenced by your Moho experience? For instance, did you limit that head turn early on so it would be easier in Moho perhaps make better use of what Moho is best at?
Yeah, I guess I have. I do bear that in mind, but the head turn as well is sort of, especially with pieces like this, is you only really need to animate what you need at the time, and the idea behind that, it was a quick look back. Um, if you acted out yourself, which I generally do as an animator, you wouldn't turn back so far. It would just look a bit odd. But yeah, certainly I do tend to bear things in mind. If this character was going to be used in more of a long form thing and had to have, you know, more full articulation and, you know, different hands, different legs, it would be a different thing. The setup would be a much longer. But yeah, I mean, certainly, I think with the thing like this sort of looping animation, which is fantastic for the internet and social media and things like that, what you're trying to do is get across one little idea. In this case, it's sort of like panic and whatever. And it's sort of like, I often find that on a lot of my notes, I've got somewhere to simplify stuff and make it easier, because it is very easy to disappear down a rabbit hole, tweaking your animation, adding loads of extra stuff. But really, it's there to serve the idea or the narrative or whatever. So I'm wandering off down a rabbit hole here anyway. So the answer to the question is yes, I do bear it in mind, but the more important thing is the idea. And if the idea needed a bigger head turn, I would have done it.
Right. Exactly. So you don't limit your idea in order to what the programs does
No,
or not.
because Moho has the tools to sort of um, to make that idea reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and some things are would just take a long time to do. But if that idea justified that, and it's like television series, they have lots of different models, they have lots of things built in, and that's what's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Dave, so Cindy is asking, good work, everyone. I have a question. Early in Clip Studio, you showed some of quick drawings for your character pose.
Mm-hmm.
She'd like to know if you ever import your drawings directly into Moho as a reference for key poses.
Yes, that's exactly what I did in the trace section here. So basically, you just go into select tracing image, and let's go. I've got tracing reference there. So when I did the head turn, I had that in. So you can work on that like that. The other thing I have done in the past is, especially on short films, is
Mhm.
you can make an animatic either in Moho or somewhere else, and bring it in as a movie in the background. So you can match that. Often what I would do is sort of bring it in as a, in fact, let's see if I can do that here. Import movie. And where did I put? Good. Import the MP4. So you can just bring this up here. You can, or you should be able to just move it out of the way, so you have some reference to work with like that. I mean, change the size of it and everything, but I've actually found that useful previously. You could use that for rotoscoping or anything, but generally, because I'm doing the animation inside Moho, I would use the view, select tracing image, and load that in and use that as the tracing reference.
Perfect. Another question, Dave. Let me just find it. Okay.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Can you recreate a simple particle from scratch?
Yeah, really simple. Okay, like that, and basically create a particle there. Uh, In fact, let's make it more interesting. I'm going to create another vector layer. And I'm going to use a triangle. So there you go. That's as simple as that. The more different particles you have. Particles can have animation in as well. Basically, anything you can do on a layer can be put as a particle. So this, let's just do something with this. So, oh, you would have to change the lifetime of that. So I think I've got it. Particle options, particle lifetime. So over time, they would change. Particles are a great thing to play around with. I've often found, though, that you kind of just need to, just fiddle around with them. Yeah, that's quite interesting to get them right. But yeah, definitely recommend playing with them.
And Juliet Weston Lewis, she said, "Thank you, Dave. That was great as always. Always good." And also, what voice sync program do you use?
What? Sorry?
If you use a sync program for voice?
Sync program?
Yeah. For, you,
Um,
for
well, if
lip
I
sync,
use
for example?
for lip sync, there's Papagayo, which was made by Mike, who made Moho. But generally, what I do, I just hand animate it, load in the soundtrack into the background. I haven't got anything set up at the minute, but you could import an audio file, and basically you get a waveform, and it will show you along with listening as well, where your different mouth shapes go. I used to use Papagayo, which kind of did it automatically. In fact, I think there's a script in here where you can do bone movement based on volume, which would give a very basic lip sync. But generally speaking, it's more fun to actually just do it manually.
Right. And where one of the last questions is, do you work with meshes, smart warp?
I yes, I am working on another project at the minute, which I haven't got to hand, where I was loading in bitmaps and playing with meshes, which actually, frankly, I'm very excited by, because I was kind of using it for mouth shapes on head turns. So you could have your different mouth shapes and actually turn it by using a mesh. It can get quite complicated, but it's quite exciting, I think. I mean, that's thing that I'm really exploring at the minute, and I'm very excited about. But I didn't
Awesome.
need it for this project.
And just one last question. Actually, it's just a tip to close the webinar. Uh, any tips, advice for anybody who would like to use Moho for their own animations or loopable animations for social media or any other project?
Yeah, start small, keep it simple. As I said, in fact, if I Yeah, look, here you go. Simplify.
Exactly.
So, and looping animations as well is just try and have an idea behind them. I've seen a lot of people who do like motion graphics and they're just a character walking. Um, they have a lot more value if there's an idea behind them. It's sort of if you have a character walking, why is he walking? You know, he could be limping. You know, why is he limping? You know, oh, he's a pirate. He has a pack. You know, it's have something like that. Add a bit of value to make because animation is quite labor intensive. So to get the best out of it, you should have an idea you're excited about. So it makes it worth you putting the time and effort in to create something.
Mm. And with those words of wisdom, thank you so much, Dave, for this
You're
amazing
entirely
webinar.
welcome.
Thank you so much for everybody who attended today. Just before we go, uh, let me just share one last bit of information. For more information about Moho and learn about Moho, please visit our website, mohoanimation.com. This webinar has been recorded and will be shared on social media and uploaded to our YouTube channel, Moho Animation. So please subscribe to get the notification once it's online. And for more information about Dave and his projects, follow him on social media, Instagram, Squeaky Pigs, also on Twitter as Squeaky Pigs, and visit his website, squeakypigs.co.uk. So with that, once again, thank you so much for this amazing presentation, Dave.
You're welcome. It was fun.
And it was fun. Yes, it was really fun, and we really learned a lot. So we also want to thank anybody and all of the people who has been watching and sharing the webinar on their own social media. So once again, thank you so much, and we hope to see you in our next event. Bye bye.